Welcome, everybody. I am Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace. With me is my partner in crime, Ellen Steverson, Starting Block Career Services. And this is a continuation of our bite-sized career strategies podcast series. And we have been podcasting and really thinking about a survey that Zippio did. And Zippio has done a study of what career-related searches have been made in each and every state. And Georgia's Google searches been around about to lose your job. And in New York, they've been doing Google searches about hating their boss. And so today we really want to talk about what to do before you leave your job. So welcome, Ellen. How are you today?
Very good. Hello, everybody. I think this is a great topic because, a lot of times when we're leaving our jobs, we are so just ready to be done. And we're walking out the door, and then all of a sudden we realize we should have done something 16 steps back. So, I mainly talk about public sector, and Nancy's the federal guru. So, Nancy, is there anything in the federal side that people really should be doing?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of it is applicable on the private sector side of things as well. First of all, you should resign formally. Let us start with that. And do not take your resignation as an opportunity to trash your supervisor, your company, what they do, the ethics, because things that are in writing, of course, live forever. But more to the point here, I think it's really important for you to think about what personal stuff do you have on organization computers. Especially if you have been in an organization, a company, an agency for a long time, the likelihood is, right or wrong, that you've used the corporate email address to take care of a lot of business, or you have stored things like your resume and your performance reviews on corporate computers. And so one of the first things I recommend that people do when they're getting ready to leave is make sure that they have copies of personal documents that they can take with them, and that they delete those personal documents that are on corporate or agency computers. We know that there's no such thing as delete in real life, but at least you should go through the effort to make sure that you're leaving your computer clean, that you have documents that you need, like copies of your payroll statements. In the federal government, I would encourage you to print out all of your standard Form 50s. Make sure you have a copy of your resume. Make sure you have copies of your performance reviews. You will need that information in your next job. You should also be sure not to take anything that doesn't belong to you.
Totally agree on that. You do not want to leave a bad taste in your employer's mouth because you walked off with something that is technically theirs. So really don't do that type of stuff. And those are absolutely the same tips that I give people when they're leaving their current job in the private sector. A lot of people, when I ask them when I'm writing their resumes, I'll say, hey, can you send me a performance evaluation? They're like, oh, they never gave them to me. Did you ask? And then they stop and they think, well, no, I'm not allowed to get them. No, you are allowed. You are entitled to have your performance evaluations. Take them. Make sure you get copies of them and don't wait till you're leaving. So every year you have a performance evaluation, copy it, keep a copy, take it home. The other thing on a funny note I will say is also I have been in many, many offices and manufacturing plants as an outside salesperson. Some people have a lot of personal stuff in their office. Plans and different things, pictures and all that. If you're really planning on leaving, maybe you need to take one plant home a week, do this slowly so you're not making a big scene, but declutter, get your private stuff. When I worked in Manhattan one time, I remember they cleaned out a desk, there were shoes in it and things like that. Again, you can't get that stuff back sometimes once you leave, you've left. So really think about cleaning out your personal stuff and maybe just declutter in general. One of the things I would also say, Nancy, that I see is when people people get unhappy at work and they're ready to quit, really your productivity goes down. You're kind of, especially like if they're in outside sales or anything like that, really almost every job I can think of, people stopped working as hard as they were when they were on the go and really excited about the job. You do not want to go out that way. So really, challenge yourself to put in a good, hard day's work so that when you come back and you need a reference, they're not thinking the most negative things like the last 6 weeks you worked, you barely did anything. So you don't want to leave that taste in anyone's mouth. You want to go out with a bang at the top of your game, hitting those numbers or doing whatever you do at work really well, because guess what? You're probably going to need a reference. And you don't want to be the person who really slacked off and made people mad.
Well, and not only need a reference, but sometimes you'll run across the people you're working with in another environment.
Or you go off thinking it's greener somewhere else and realize, guess what? It's not. And now you want to come back to the company and now you have to overcome you not being that well at your job the last couple of weeks. So really go out at the top of your game.
I think something else I would encourage people to do is to write down everything that is in progress, type up a memo. I've got these projects. Here's where I stand. Here's where those files are. Here is who I'm working with and their contact information, with a goal of making the transition as easy as possible. And it is just another way to leave professionally and appropriately and with a good taste in everybody's mouth. And yes, it takes a little extra time to organize everything, but it's professional.
Right. And you want to leave those relationships intact. As you're saying that, Nancy, I've actually had clients get let go because they're part of a reduction of force. And I'll say to them, well, did you do anything during the acquisition part when you were transitioning to a new company to help this new company? And then they'll start telling me things like that. Well, I made up a list. I did these different things for the new people. And in the end, my job still got cut, which is upsetting. But look at how nice you could write something on your resume about how you helped that company transition and use that as a talking point of why you might be part of a reduction in force and all that. So there's always a way to put a good twist on your story, and you want to be professional going out. The other thing I would say is, if you are thinking anything could be happening with your job or acquisition, or you might get fired or anything like that, that is the time to start looking at LinkedIn recommendations, maybe saying to somebody next to you, hey, we had such a good time on that project and it ended so well. How about I write you up a recommendation for that project and you write me up a recommendation and we put it on LinkedIn. And even on LinkedIn now, if you put a project in the project section, you can tag other people so that they're on LinkedIn with you for that project. So kind of get that camaraderie and those reviews on your LinkedIn. So 6 months later, if for some reason your company does have a reduction in force or you decide to quit and go somewhere else, you now have that information out there on LinkedIn.
That's a great idea, Ellen. And something you said kind of triggered something for me too. If you're working with an organization that is getting ready to go through a merger or might be bought or is doing poorly and might shut down, any of those things, I think it's a reminder that we should always keep the stuff we need for our personal career at home. Absolutely. And while it is very tempting to have your current resume on your work computer because that's where you're sending it out to others, in reality, for many people, less so on the federal side because there's notice involved, but for many people, today could be their last day and they don't have a clue. And if you have to walk out right now without an opportunity to pull stuff off your computer, you may very well be up the creek without the proverbial paddle. And so we all need to be thinking from a career perspective that no one cares about our career as much as we do. And we have to take ownership for it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking the whole time you were talking. That to me is, owning your career. And when we own something, we take care of it. And you should be taking care of it all the way through and really being mindful of not only the relationships we've already discussed, but what about the external relationships you have? You have a vendor or consultant outside of your company, really make sure you're keeping up with those relationships well, and really make sure you have contact information on everyone. Like, are they on LinkedIn? If they are, connect with them. Do you have emails for people? Maybe some people that you would like to ask to be a reference for you, you need to ask them for their cell phone number or have it available. So really manage your career on a personal level, because like Nancy said, and she's absolutely right, nobody will care about your career as much as you do. And at the end of the day, the career part of our story is where we work. And that where is changing more times now than ever before. Nobody really works for a company for 50 years anymore. So you want to make sure, not that it can't happen, and it would be wonderful if it did, but at the end of the day, you really need to know who you are and the value you bring, and keep your stuff in order, and then you can easily move on to the next job.
I think that's great advice. The only asterisk that I would add there, Ellen, would be aware of your organization's conflict of interest rules, because there are certain jobs and certain situations where you might be prohibited from going to work for a competitor, reaching out to a vendor, things like that. So you don't want to end up in trouble, but on balance, you're absolutely correct.
Right. And when I said reach out to a vendor, I meant more, you are right, because I work with a lot of people who have contracts and non-compete contracts. So you do have to know what you signed. But from a vendor point of view, I'm talking about for references. Like if you know you're leaving a company, maybe nobody there is going to give you a good reference, or you just don't want to ask them for whatever reasons. Again, a vendor, customer, and things like that. Going to ask them for jobs, Nancy's absolutely right. You need to know what you signed and what your policies are.
And have a copy of it. It
Oh,
goes
yeah, absolutely, definitely. So be very mindful of all that stuff.
because you're on your way out the door. It is not the right time to ask for a copy of your employment agreement.
Good point, Nancy. That is absolutely right.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellen. Anything else that we missed here in thinking about what to do before you leave a job?
The only other note I have is if you really like your company, you're just not happy, you hate your current job, look for inside transfers. What else could you do? And I know that's very relevant in the federal world, changing jobs or working with other agencies. And we definitely have to discuss this on other podcasts. So that's my little final note.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Once again, I am Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace. And with me is
Ellen Steverson with Starting Block Career Services. And if you haven't connected with us on LinkedIn yet, please do so. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit Nancy or Ellen's website for additional information about our services, a free tip sheet which highlights our discussion today, and be sure to tune in to our next podcast, which will be posted soon. Thank you.